Welcome everybody to another week of Game Wisdom Live. This is for the week of November 30th, 2017. We are officially entering the end of the year, which means we'll be talking all that great stuff in the near future. As you can see up in my corner there, Rob is not on this week. He is still getting used to his new job at, I think it was Take-Two. I always get Take-Two and 2K games confused. I'm sure he's going to be pitching them the idea of Josh boxes or Rob boxes in the near future. But fortunately, we have a relief co-host this week. So please welcome from PVP.Live. I forget your title. I think you said you are the manager of content, but please welcome Carter Dotson.
Josh, thanks so much for having me on. You got that title correct. I just got that title recently, so I'm glad to show it off.
Nice. I'm going to raise you up just a little bit on my end. And for those of you watching this live, please let me know how he sounds. But Carter, it's great to have you on. I met Carter through my friend Josh, who also works at PVP.Live, who's also a supporter on the Patreon. And at some point, we need to have him on with Rob, and I'm sure that'll be like a 3-hour podcast between the three of us. But it's great to have you. You're also, besides the manager of content, you are also an enthusiast and follower of mobile games, right?
Oh yeah, I'm a huge mobile gaming fan. I've covered mobile gaming since 2009. I've written for pretty much every major mobile gaming outlet that's out there, and yeah, I got started at PVP.Live, live specializing in mobile games. My role's kind of expanded since then. I've been with PVP.Live since June. It's been a whirlwind 5 months, but yeah, I'm all about mobile gaming. I literally just bought like my first console of this generation last week.
Well, that's pretty fun because I think last month I bought my first smartphone. So I guess we're kind of even on those fronts there.
Yeah.
So, before we get going with the news and, of course, our daily or our weekly discussions, I have some important announcements to make for the folks who enjoy watching Game Wisdom Live and, of course, the content here. So, the first thing, of course, is that the Patreon for November is going to be ending tonight, or for those of you watching this recorded, be ending yesterday. So, I'll have some new goals set up and planned, probably in the next week. In terms of that, though, next week I'm going to be starting doing some temporary work throughout December, mainly on Monday and Fridays. So it kind of sucks I'll be gone for the full days, but it's money in my pocket, and again, it's only going to be for those days. So if you're trying to get a hold of me then, I won't be here. Of course, I'm betting on Monday. With my luck, that's when all the major game announcements will happen. You know, like right around 1 o'clock, we'll hear that Steam is closing down, World of Warcraft is being canceled, and by the time I come out of the office, we'll be in the apocalypse at that point. That will be my best luck there. Now, in terms of some exciting news, I'm in talks with a local radio station to take some of my previously recorded podcasts and post it on their like local community radio station. It won't be anything paid, but it'll kind of be a way of reaching out to the people of, I think it's like a 5-mile radius in Philadelphia. And maybe this will be the start of my radio career after all that. Now, unfortunately for those of you watching this, probably you won't be able to listen to it, sadly, but I'll let you know once things get confirmed and all that. Now, that said, one last little bit of administration work or administrative business. This will be our last Thursday night show for the foreseeable future on Game Wisdom. Again, for those of you watching this, you know my co-host Rob. He got a new job at 2K, or again 2K or Take. Wow, my mouth just died there. 2K or Take-Two, and unfortunately, they won't let him stream from the office. So, starting next Sunday, we will be doing our broadcasts on our Game Wisdom Live shows on Sunday afternoon. Right now I'm thinking around 2:33 EST. But I'll be making another announcement video next Thursday, and again on Sunday as well. That's going to be moving things around a little bit in terms of when things get posted, but we'll deal with that next week. But again, just to reiterate, next Sunday, that will be the 9th of December. That will be our next Game Wisdom Live show. But now that all that boring stuff is out of the way, let's get back to what we usually talk about on these shows, and that's what's been happening in the world of the game industry. And there's been some very crazy news pieces this week. So, for you, Carter, I don't know, do you follow Star Citizen at all? That massive Kickstarter-based game.
I don't follow it too closely, but I'm definitely aware of the story, and I believe there is some news they launched a new like they're selling land now, I believe.
Yes, that's the crazy thing. Again, for those of you who, by some strange miracle, have never heard of it, Star Citizen is the massively multiplayer space simulator game from Cloud Imperium Games. It went on Kickstarter. I don't even remember how long ago, but they've been doing crowdfunding afterwards with more and more stretch goals and additional content. And as of this week, they have announced, I'm trying to look on their website to see if they've actually put it in there as a possible purchase, but they have raised an insane amount of money, which if their website decides to load, okay, here it is. They have raised, oh my goodness, it's even more than I thought it was, $169 million since it went on Kickstarter. I know, that's the same face that everybody who comes on makes whenever we mention that amount.
How?
I,
How?
I don't know how. It is crazy. And of course, a few days ago, oh my goodness. Oh, that's right. 2 days ago, they actually made, or on the 25th and 26th, they raised $1 million on both days. So $2 million in 2 days. Whew. Oh my god. But while we're still reeling from that bit of news, they have announced that a new feature that they're adding to the game is the ability to buy land. Yes, you are buying land in a massively multiplayer space-based game. And I'm trying to see if I can find the exact costs. Let's see. They can pre-purchase land for $50 to $100 using real money, or they can spend the in-game currency when it comes out. And it will be for commercial, residential, or industrial use. I'm sorry. Oh my goodness. And I'm sure it's going to cost a lot more money in the future. And the game's still not out yet. That's the crazy part about all this. And I have a friend, Brian Rubin, who does Space Game Junkie, where he just talks all about space games. So I'm sure he's just sitting there, like, in a fetal position as he read that news. Oh, man. I know.
That's just it's just absurd. I mean, like, is this game even like? Is there anything that people can play at all right now? There has to be something.
Yeah, there is, like, I think a working beta or even a working alpha that supporters can play. I know there have been people who stream and post videos on it, but in terms of the actual game being released, I have no idea. And El Gordo in chat said that it was 4 years ago that it started as Kickstarter. Oh my god. It again, with the game industry, it moves so fast. It feels like it's been around for like a decade now. It's only been 4 years. And hey, Getter, thanks for coming on. Oh man, but yeah, it's gotten crazy over there. I know there have been people tearing it apart in terms of the issues they've had. I know there are super diehard fans, obviously, by the fact that people are spending thousands of dollars on this content. And we were talking about this last night on our game stream, but I'm in the opinion that this is just going to be a spectacular failure when everything ends. I guess, do you have any thoughts on that, Carter?
Yeah, I was talking to I was out at a studio in Texas a couple years ago, and the topic kind of came up, and they were thinking there's no way this is going to end well for anyone, and it's just crazy the fact that this game keeps getting crowdfunding. I'm like, and look, I'm a mobile game lifer. Mobile games are my thing. Yeah, I'm sorry I don't want to make that like my entire personality. It's not, but it's a big part of my life. I love mobile games. It's given me a career. I don't believe in mobile games as strongly as the Star Citizen community believes in this game that they have barely played. It's utterly baffling that it just keeps going, especially in this day and age of of people getting outraged at at games having certain things they don't like, and yet here we have Star Citizen, which is barely a game that you could play at all, and yet it keeps getting money. I
Mhm.
don't. It's like it escaped from a parallel universe or from an alternate universe that leaked into this one. It just doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm. Oscar is saying in chat that maybe they're saying for retirement. I think I made this joke when we talked about the whole No Man's Sky crash, but at this point, I think they're just building an actual spaceship because I think they're going to have to flee the atmosphere when this is all done.
Or that's the only thing that they can properly deliver on. It's like, well, if we're making all this money, the
Mm-hmm.
only thing that's going to satisfy people here is if we actually give them
Mm-hmm.
intergalactic space simulation.
That could be true. Maybe they're building a spaceship to test all the simulation aspects of it, and then they'll bring that into the game. And hey, Mike, this is Carter Dotson from PvP.Live. Rob again is out this week. I think he's trying to take over Take Two right now, so we'll see if that works next week for him. But Star Citizen again, like uh, I'm only like a neophyte when it comes to this whole black hole of Star Citizen. But I remember just like looking at some of their stretch goals over the years. They had one for like we're going to create an alien language. We're going to create actual geography in our games, and we're going to build all this. I'm just like, how is this game getting done? Is this game ever going to get done?
I mean, is it even worth finishing if you can just consistently get people to keep paying for your ideas?
Mm-hmm. And oh my goodness, it got to the point where they've actually stopped listing stretch goals. I don't know if that's just because they ran out of ideas or what, but I just don't know what's going to happen with this game. Like we've been talking for years now about the games that will cause like Kickstarter and crowdfunding to crash. And I don't know what's going to happen with this one. What it's going to impact when they say either yes, it's done, or we're just out.
I I mean the thing is, like, I feel like when it comes to crowdfunding, that Star Citizen has kind of hit escape velocity.
Mm-hmm.
That it is on its own level of crowdfunding disaster, but because I think it's so much of its own thing of it's drawn in the Star Citizen obsessives that I don't know what the impact outside of that's going to be, because
Mm-hmm.
I feel like kind of the crowdfunding craze and then the the blowback to it has kind of come and gone, and it's just kind of a, Kickstarter is just kind of a thing now. But
Mm-hmm.
here's Star Citizen off in its own little world, still doing its thing, and it's just going.
Yeah. Oh, and that's right. I also just mentioned it's gone so long they've already changed the game engine, and that's never a good sign, especially for these very long projects. So at this point, I think we're all just waiting here to see what's going to happen with this game.
I really hope that it turns out to be the game of these people's dreams. I want it to work out. The rational part of me is like, there's no way they're going to be able to deliver on everything here. But then there's part of me that's like, what if they pull it off somehow?
Oh my goodness! I guess stranger things have happened. We'll have to see. I
It's
guess
2017. I'm not
yeah,
putting anything past.
exactly. Now, I guess moving to something a little bit lighter, I guess on the more weird side of things, it's been announced that Nintendo is going to be releasing a brand new Super Mario cereal, and that the box is also going to be an amiibo as well for Super Mario Odyssey. And after I read the news piece about that, I actually remember having that Nintendo Power cereal back in, I think it was only around like 2 or 3 years in the late 80s. But that is definitely something very interesting to see Nintendo really trying to get crazy with all these ideas between the amiibos and, of course, mobile games as well.
The thing that was interesting about the kind of the amiibo on the
Mm-hmm.
cereal box thing is I feel like it maybe demystifies the amiibo a bit. It's like, oh, it's just a code on a cardboard box. versus here's this figure, it does things. It feels like it's kind of just like demystifying the amiibo concept a bit.
Yeah, it could be. I don't think they would put like a little. It would be crazy to put like a little IR chip on the box. That would just be stupid. But yeah, maybe it's just like a scan, or maybe there's like it's just like a barcode there that's actually doing it. But I mean, if there's any game for Nintendo to really capitalize on, I guess Super Mario Odyssey is certainly it. I mean, who are we to talk about? There was the whole getting double Call of Duty XP points with like Doritos and Mountain Dew from a few years back.
Oh, yep, that was I went crazy for that back a decade ago.
Oscar saying give Amiibo beer. Oh goodness, that would cause. Now that is one hell of a market diversion or competing markets there. I know. Dad or mom buys a beer. They give the can to the kid, and the kid gets a bonus. I think we've just found the way for Nintendo to appeal to adults right there.
Yes, it's their next like $1 billion business is we put amiibos on beer cans.
Oh, and then there's special wear cans. And the kids will go, Daddy, you have to buy more beer. Oh, goodness. I think we shouldn't be saying that. I think we're going to get in trouble. Or wait, you're the guest. I'm going to get in trouble for this when this is all said and done.
Yeah, this is your show.
Yeah, I'm the one who's, oh, that's great. Carter will get off scot-free. You two will be coming down on me after this cast. Ooh. Oh man, I guess while I look up any other interesting news, I guess for you, Carter, are there any news pieces that stood out for you this week?
I don't know. I would say that some of the news about Star Wars Battlefront 2 kind of pulling the plug on microtransactions and the news of like EA losing $3 billion in value is just it's fascinating to me in two aspects. One is that first off that you have these basically angry internet commentators that are able to sink a company's value by so much, and just that kind of maybe this gets into a larger topic of just how mobile game monetization and just free to play monetization is starting to creep into console games, but we're seeing a little bit of blowback to it before it kind of takes root.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's going to be. Oh, they're still talking in chat about the Nintendo cans. I think I don't know what's better. Getters saying that we could have like the invincibility star effect on the cans, or Mario scandal that this will introduce kids to alcoholism. That is great. We gotta get all that before anything else happens. But yeah, when it comes to Battlefront, I mean, this was. I was talking to Game Economist Ramin I think it was last week or the week before about this, and this whole EA scandal with Battlefront 2 is really, this seems to be the, I guess the beachhead or cannon or fronthead moment here regarding the discussions of loot boxes and what their impacts mean to video games. And as you said, Carter, there have been reports that EA has lost about $3 billion just due to this whole scandal. And again, that is insane, especially when you couple that with Disney basically, breathing down EA's neck. So, what did you do to our Star Wars game?
Yeah, for sure. And that's one of the fascinating aspects of it is, obviously Disney's going to exploit the Star Wars license as much as possible, but in particular when you have, the next Star Wars movie, The Last Jedi, coming out in a couple weeks. But on the other side, whenever anyone mentions Star Wars in the gaming world, it's with Star Wars Battlefront 2, and it feels like almost like there's not a lot of talk about the game itself. It's all the controversy, and that's not good for the brand. For the Star Wars brands, I could see why Disney would be like, "Hey, y'all gotta cut this off."
Yeah. And I know my face is a little red here. My computer is always in the hottest room of my house, so I'm already getting a little heated up here. I'm sure it'll get redder as the night goes on. We'll see. But Yeah, definitely a watershed moment, as Getter said, and as you said, Carter. I mean, you have the next Star Wars movie, or should we say the sequel to what's considered the new trilogy coming out next month, or actually, after tonight, this month. And
2 weeks.
yeah, and Disney probably doesn't want any negative words associated with Star Wars right now.
Yeah, and it's kind of fascinating that like we kind of get to see the corporate food chain here. That apparently Disney's a little higher up than EA.
Oh yes. And speaking about Disney, of course, they also pulled the plug on that Marvel Heroes game I think it was like 2 weeks ago, and Gazillion Entertainment, the developers, had basically been scuttled because of that. I was going to saying I could have a red glow in the dark Josh figurine for Patreon. At some point, I need to look into if we can have little figurines. I think that could be the next step for Patreon. But yeah, like this has definitely been a very interesting time, especially as we're seeing more of these properties intersect the various pop culture areas. Again, I mean Marvel, we have, the Marvel TV shows, the Netflix shows, comics, the movies, everything is and of course the video games. So, if one thing does bad, a lot of these big companies I think are afraid that it affects all aspects of it.
Yeah, for sure, and in particular because I think everything, like I said, everything's kind of getting interconnected now, and yeah, if one domino falls, how is it going to cause a chain reaction effect?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as EA was like trying to like get around, they've turned things off, but it sounds like at some point they're going to turn things back on. And as Getter said a few minutes ago, the market soon forgets. I'm sure EA is counting the minutes, whatever the next big scandal or discussion will be, that takes eyes off of Battlefront, and then they can, very quietly put these back on.
What I think would have been fascinating is if EA just kind of weathered the storm on this one and would have been like, okay, yeah, people are mad about these loot boxes, but what about the audience that would pay for them, or even the people that would complain would begrudgingly pay for them? I think that would have been fascinating to
Mm-hmm.
see, but yeah, I think they had to pull the plug, especially when Disney's calling you and be like, you'll need to cut this out.
Yeah, when Disney's the one who says that you're being too greedy with the money,
Yeah, yeah.
or you're being too greedy with transactions, something has gone horribly wrong in the pipeline there. Yeah.
No,
Um.
I think I was going to say someone in the chat was talking about. I think it was Getter talking about potential regulations. I'm actually sorry to kind of hijack the show, but I'm curious for your thoughts on what do you see for the future of like microtransaction and loot box regulation.
Yeah, we've been certainly been playing around and discussing that for a few weeks now. I think for myself, I do think there should be some regulations at this point, whether it comes from within or outside the industry, just because it has really become a very pervasive element to a lot of these games, and it just seems like it's not there to benefit the consumer. And I know there's been arguments about whether it is considered gambling, whether it's not, and I mean, we could easily have another 2 hour discussion on that like it's nothing. But I guess for you, what do you think about it, Carter?
Well, I would like to see preferably as an industry driven standard, but possibly as a regulatory thing, the publication of odds for loot boxes
Mm-hmm.
and randomized elements like that. I know that that exists in China for
Yeah.
some games. I know that for like the Blizzard games like Overwatch and Hearthstone, the rarity rates have come out for that, and I think that's good information for people to have. I don't know how much regulation. I don't know if regulation is if it's a plausible thing. A lot of the rumblings I think have come from Europe so far, but you look you look at the game market in Asia, such as such as in Japan and in China, where mobile games are just doing massive,
Mm-hmm.
massive business, and free to play is the dominant form of gaming there, and loot boxes are a part of that. You kind of wonder, well, if Europe is the first territory to really regulate this, I mean, how much of an impact is it really going to have when you have a very business friendly government in the U.S. right now, and you have a market that is very very accepting of free to play and kind of randomized loot box systems over in the massive eastern market. I'm curious to see where things go, and it might be if the U.S. or if China or Japan or Korea make major moves as to what will happen from there.
Hmm. And I think, as you said, Carter, with the idea of listing the actual percent chances, I think that's certainly a strong start. I was talking to some friends about this. I think one thing that would nip it in the bud, but it will probably never happen, is if the loot boxes can no longer pay out in duplicates. As in, there is a fixed number that one person can buy, essentially. But the problem, of course, with that is if you put that system in, it basically completely destroys it from the developer or publisher standpoint, because then there's a fixed limit.
Yeah, and then the problem becomes, well, how does a system like, say, Clash Royale work, where you level
Mm-hmm.
up cards by
Oh,
getting
yes.
duplicates of the same card? Does that necessarily work? Because maybe you could be like, oh, hey, yeah, so we will have like a level max of like the maximum number of cards you can get, but that can be impossible to attain from a practical standpoint.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and that's the always been that the rub there with these kind of discussions is that unless someone comes down with a hammer and says you cannot do this, this, and this, there will be ways to get around it. We've seen this with skin gambling and CS:GO, the gray or black market of game CDs or game keys like on G2A and other sites. Like until there's an actual official ruling, we can just keep shifting the line in the sand, kind of.
And I think part of it is just that because we exist in this kind of rapidly moving culture, and of where people, where any develop we've seen game development become so democratized and open up to to outfits in new territories, and the market's moving faster than anyone can react to it or regulate it. And if you it's like a thing of like gambling. If you regulate it, well, there's going to be someone else that's going to come up with another idea to make money. In part because it's the idea of there's things that consumers want, but also there's people out there that are looking for the next big way to make money off of consumers.
Yeah. And at some point, there's always that balance between are you providing a quality product for people, or are you just trying to fleece them out of their money? And Oscar's mentioning in chat, I heard about that game too. It's an AR game that they're describing as Pokemon Go with guns. And they have cryptocurrency in there as well, I guess, to add even more to it. And as you just said, Carter, we see this again with the whole skin buying and the gray market on game keys, that if there's a way to make money, there will be people who will try to figure out the best way and make that money at the expense of the consumers, or in some cases at the expense of the developers as well.
Yeah, especially with some of these gray practically black market key resellers. They exist in such a murky ethical area, and there are stores out there that operate with no sense of morality at all.
Hmm. And again, until official rulings come down, the game, as I've said before, is kind of like the Wild West. There's just a lot in terms of, everyone's allowed to do their own thing. And as we said before, it's almost impossible to get every game developer, to agree on like the same topic or the same standard in these cases.
Well, yeah, that's a yeah, that's the thing, and
Yeah.
part of it as well is that there are so many
Oh yeah.
companies out there trying to find the next big gold rush, the next big way to make money out there. And the thing that was fascinating. So I was at Mobile Games Festival in Seattle back in late October, and it was very interesting because any kind of topic of the future of gaming, whether it was talking about esports, VR or AR, those kinds of things, like it was very very uncertain to the point of skepticism at times. Even the advocates for VR and AR is like, there's no money right now from
Hmm.
consumers. It's all corporate funding. But the things that they were talking about that were making big money were talking about ways to, making money off of in-app purchases, finding better ways to monetize your audience. And even there was one company that was talking about retargeting, which was the idea of putting ads in other games to get people to come back to games that they already played and already spent in, to get them back into the loop of playing and spending on our game. So you're paying to reacquire customers, and apparently it's, for this company, they've had some examples of being really really effective with it. And it was really, that was kind of my takeaway, was like, there's a sort of conservatism in terms of business right now, as far as on the mobile side of things, of like, the proven methods, it's about refining them, but anything big and unknown is, you could say, oh, AR is going to be like a $10 billion industry in a decade, but there's a lot of question marks in between there.
Oh yeah, same thing that goes for VR as well. I mean, for the last like 3-4 years since we heard about the Rift and the Vive being funded, people were talking about the future of VR. It's going to be this amazing thing for video games, and everyone's going to love it. And it's just kind of like appeared, and then like we're not really hearing all that much about it. And at least from the general consumer standpoint, as you said, Carter, I mean, I've heard people talk about the pros of using VR, and of course, by extension, AR, for other industries and other businesses. And there's certainly a lot of exciting things there. But I'm still not seeing any reason like why I should go out right now and get any kind of VR helmet and, use it for my video games.
Yeah, and I was even talking to a VR developer. Someone, they make like kind of educational simulations and some game stuff. They were like, well, for one, like our computers couldn't. We had powerful computers. They couldn't even run VR to an effective degree, and it's like, well, what does that say? If we have these expensive computers that we do development on, we can barely even make good VR as it is. I mean, how much longer can VR go in this kind of, it's the next big thing phase, before everyone that's put in their early investments is like, well, we need to start seeing returns. And for me, VR is, I think that if it's going to be the next big thing, like it needs to get into a lot more consumers' hands, and to kind of like public showcases, and even to see mobile VR, I think, advance to a greater degree. I think mobile VR is, for whoever can get it to work very well, will advance the field a lot. If mobile VR is not going to be as good as a Vive or Oculus or the Rift, it's not going to be as good. But if it can give you enough of that experience to sell you on, hey, VR can be really cool, and you can get that into more consumers' hands, well, could that do it? And as Oscar, I think, is saying, mobile seems to go for AR. I'm interested to see where that goes. But like, you see things like iOS 11 introduced ARKit, and well, I mean, did that do anything after the first week? Not really.
Yeah. And same thing for me, Mike, that VR, at least in the past, was always a bother on my eyes. I mean, but again, for those of you watching, you have to remember, I'm thinking VR back in the mid-90s, when, the Lawnmower Man hackers was all the rage. Like, I have a friend, Ken, who he's basically the big VR evangelist. He's the guy who, he got in on the Rift and the Vive from day one. He has the Omni treadmill. I'm sure he's probably bought more devices since we last spoke, and he's definitely a huge proponent of it. But again, I'm just not seeing it. Like, it seems like something that's nice to have, but I'm not seeing that's selling me on VR.
Yeah, and right now, like, it's such a rich man's game too.
Oh,
Of, like,
yes.
you need a powerful system. You need like, I mean, I think you could run PlayStation VR on a basic PS4, but it's not going to be the ideal experience. But you need a powerful hardware. You need an expensive headset. Motion controllers are extra on top of that, and it's all very complicated. And the way that I just see the market going right now, what's been big? It's been mobile convenience. And you look at the Switch and the idea of, oh, this is a game system. I can take my games anywhere. It's so convenient.
Yeah.
VR seems to kind of go against that trend of convenience, and I don't know. I'm just not seeing it in the near future. If the investment money that's there keeps coming, and there's a lot of parties that are willing to keep throwing us at the idea that it could be the next big gold rush, that it could be the next big thing, then sure. But I mean, I feel like there's an end point of where, well, maybe this just isn't a consumer thing.
Yeah, and don't forget also the space that you need to set these things up. I mean, I'm in my tiny little office here at my computer, but yeah, I couldn't hook up like a VR system. I'll probably knock myself out the window trying to reach for something in the game. But like, there's just a lot that goes. It's the same thing that we saw with the whole party game genre of the last decade. You remember, the rock bands, Guitar Heroes, and the like. That costs, well, didn't cost as much as VR, but it still costs a lot more than your traditional game, and of course all the extra stuff on top of that.
Yeah, and that's just like I said, it's just moving, I think, in the wrong direction, where we see, like I said, free to play and mobile and the Switch and games everywhere. That's really seems to be the big trend of people wanting their entertainment at their fingertips wherever they want, and want it as easily as possible. And yet VR is moving in the direction of you have to be here, you have to have this headset on, you have to have these controls, you have to have this expensive hardware, you're tethered down, and it's just it seems it just seems backwards. VR is a cool idea. I've played around with VR. It's great, but but I just don't see it as I just don't see the consumer angle to it.
Yeah, it's even Oscar just brought up about like the Tony Hawk game, that board motion control. I think I remember that, and I don't think I ever want to do that one again. But I think the motion controls are also a similar aspect in that they're there to enhance the game, but none of it is actually selling. And speaking about motion controls, I also know a lot of people complain about them in Super Mario Odyssey. I think they also complain about it in Super Mario Galaxy. It's like, why should I have to flick my wrist around when I can just push a button and accomplish the same task?
Yeah, we and I mean we as like kind of gamers as a whole have gotten used to this idea of the controller as the way that we interact with things, and we're not going to give it up easily unless it's something that's proven to be better. And to kind of bring this back to the mobile space, I kind of see that when people talk about like virtual joysticks and virtual buttons on phone games, and it's like, well, that tactility isn't there, it's an inferior experience. And I mean, from a certain perspective, absolutely, is it as good as a physical joystick and buttons? No, of course not. But when you spend years playing these games, and when you particularly have like the audience of like younger gamers that are growing up with this as the norm, like are fine with it. They understand it. It's been kind of drilled into their brain from an earlier age that they're used to it, and they don't, and it's not necessarily as quite the shock as much as, say, motion controls are to someone who's played with controllers. So I'd actually be interested to see what kind of like the younger generation do if they play with motion controls, and if motion controls continue to be a thing, if they're like, well, I don't see the problem with it.
Yep, it's definitely going to be interesting to see how things go forward with VR and AR like that. And I think everyone is just waiting for that one game, the Mario Odyssey of VR, or the Call of Duty or something like that, that convinces people that it's worth making use of. But it's going to be, I think, a very hard sell until we get that.
Yeah, very very hard sell, and I think it's going to require it's going to require, I think, the prices and to get down to a point of where someone could get into it at hey, maybe that's just a couple $100. I can get into this now. Maybe once we get to that point,
yeah.
but I don't think we're quite at that point of where someone can buy an affordable, ideal VR experience.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so I guess Moving on from VR or AR, I completely forgot how we got on this as well, which is great. That always happens in these discussions. I guess we were talking about loot boxes. I guess any other news pieces for you, Carter, that interest you this week?
Uh, no, not on top, not off the top of my head.
All right. Yep, and I can't think of anything else, at least for right now. I'm sure something may pop up from chat in a few minutes. But I guess let's move on to some of the games we've been playing this week. And since you're new to the show, you can give everyone a brand new list of games that we probably haven't heard of. So, since this week has been the big Steam sale for me, I got a pretty big list. So, I'll let you go first in terms of games that you've been playing.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, this is it's kind of funny. You bring on a guy who big on mobile, and the past week I've been playing mostly console games. Been playing actually a lot of Call of Duty World War II, and the thing. So I used to play Call of Duty a lot just because I like the game background, the first Modern Warfare, and I had friends that played the games, and that was really the thing that drove me to it. And it's been kind of funny that the marketing has been, get the squad back together. It's boots on the ground again. And I remember playing the beta and was like, oh, this is Call of Duty. I've missed all of the insanity from the last 5 years of jetpacks and whatnot. It's kind of funny just playing this game. It's like, well, there's not been a whole lot of changes, but that's fine. It's been 5 years since I played a Call of Duty game. I enjoy kind of going back to it, and I've been reconnecting with friends that have been getting into the game. But it's kind of funny in the multiplayer side of it. I've followed console gaming and the trends there, but diving into like the headquarters mode of Call of Duty and seeing like, oh, you get this daily reward for logging in, and there's objectives to complete, and here's the supply drops that give you items with different rarities. I'm like, I've seen this story before.
It seems very
played these
familiar.
games before. This is all way more familiar than I expected.
Wait a minute, what's going on here? Oh man, I have yet to actually buy a Call of Duty game since like the original one, way back in the microtransaction era, sometime in the year 1875 was the last time I played a Call of Duty game. Or last time I owned one. I did play the free weekends a few times, and it was just basically me going spawn, die, spawn, die, spawn, take 2 steps forward, get sniped in the back, die. And that was about it for me.
Yeah, I used to play World at War with my dad a lot, and yeah, and he played like NES games and Genesis, but first person shooters weren't really a thing for him, so he was not that great. He's playing against people that have the muscle memory, and they're used to first person shooters, and he just got completely trashed. He still loved it though.
I guess here's a question for you, Carter. As someone, again, coming from the mobile space, what did you think about the whole loot box integration in Call of Duty World War? Or World War II, yeah.
Well, like, the thing that's interesting about it to me is the fact that you have this, they're barely disguising the fact that it's a mobile monetization system, and it's in a $60 game. And my thinking for a long time now has been that free-to-play is going to come to consoles and be a dominant business model very soon. It works too well on mobile and on PC in many cases for it to not work. I don't think that console and PC gamers are immune to these tactics, even though a lot of them like to say, "Oh, we're better than these mobile games." No, I don't. I think these tactics will work on you, but it's the thing I maybe didn't consider was like hearing about these games that are $60. Things like Overwatch with the loot boxes and seeing how well that does, and things like GTA Online, which is a game that sells for $60 and then has the online mode with purchases in there. And I'm like, are console gamers big enough suckers that they'll still pay $60 for a lot of games and then basically pay for a free-to-play game inside of there, and just actually playing that and seeing that system for myself in Call of Duty was like, Wow,
Yeah.
wow, that transition, the transition could happen to free to play, and I think it will be a bit less of a shock to the system of people than maybe any than maybe a lot of gamers would expect. But still, it's just so fascinating to see like
Hmm.
these exact systems that I've been playing in these games on my phone in Call of Duty.
Yeah. And we were just talking about this, I think, a few days ago. But yeah, I'm definitely interested to see like at what point will the shoe drop, and we will see a actual free to play game, instead of a $60 version from the AAA developers.
Yeah, yeah, and I feel like maybe the big thing holding free to play back on consoles is the whole retail side of it.
Hmm.
Um, the because GameStop I think still is so big and retail is so big, but I remember I remember the story, but I was reading somewhere today that like for a $60 game, selling that game digitally versus selling the retail copy saves a publisher $10.
Hmm. Yeah, I would believe it, especially with shipping and again dealing with the whatever store you're trying to operate with. It should save them money. And we were talking about this a few years ago with the whole Xbox One when it was originally announced. It was going to be only online for a console, and it was eventually crushed after too many people complained. But what if it
Yep.
didn't get crushed? What if that became the standard? It would be very interesting about seeing the retail side kind of be shifted around or being outright removed.
Yeah, and I think that it would be interesting to see. Like, to be honest, now that I have a PS4, I'm like, be nice if I could just install these games I have on disc and be able to play them without needing the disc necessarily. But yeah, but as much as I think we see this kind of digital distribution future, there's still a demand
Hmm.
for products at retail, and it's hard to it's hard to give up. And and for all the thoughts of we're online 99.9% of the time, it's that 0.1% that
Hmm.
people freak out about. And to a certain degree, we don't need everything to be online. And we should have the right to sell our games back as used
Yeah.
copies. And
Or simply just sell
yeah,
the ownership of the key. I would think that would be like a simple thing. But
yeah, that
again,
yeah, yeah,
but
for sure.
yeah, but of course the challenge of that is the fact that it's still ruled that we are leasing the game keys we're leasing the copies of the game when we buy them digitally.
Yep.
But that would be interesting. Like I would be a supporter of that to allow people to have ownership of those keys because again, it's still one to one. I can't take that key and mass produce it to the winds kind of thing.
And kind of on that topic of like ownership of digital content to a certain degree, there was a bit of a controversy over on iOS earlier this year with iOS 11 shutting down access to 32-bit games as the
Mm.
OS is going 64-bit
Uh,
only. And there's a lot of classic iOS games and a lot of apps that became non-functional because Apple decided, okay, iOS 11 isn't going to support 32-bit anymore.
mm. And that's actually a really good point too, Carter, about the ownership of these digital goods. And again, going back to Call of Duty and even mobile games in general, there are, as we all know, there is big money in microtransactions and this free-to-play market. But what happens when those games are either no longer being supported or they go under? At least when it comes to traditional games, if as long as I have a copy of the game, I can still play it. I mean, there's plenty of Steam games I'm still playing 5 to 10 years after they've been released. But the question is, if someone, let's say, spent the last 3 years spending who knows how much money in a mobile game, and then that mobile game is no longer being supported or closes, all that value is basically, dust in the wind.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that maybe in at some point in the future, archivists are going to look back at this and be like, wow, there's so many of these experiences that are just lost forever. But then there's also the flip side of the coin is we now live in a time where where there's infinite content potential. I mean, there's practically infinite content. We can't save everything.
Hmm. And Apple owns your soul. I got an Android, so at least I didn't give up my entire soul there.
I've got an iPhone right now, but I've got an Android phone on the way. I'm coming back home.
Like, to give you a case in point, that Marvel Heroes game I was talking about a few minutes ago, there is no store listing for it anymore on Steam. It is gone, kaput. It's never going to be around. And that game's been out for that game was out for several years with a whole lot of in-game microtransactions and DLC and special sales and all that stuff. And I know there are quite a few people out there who are furious with Gazillion, or by extension Marvel and DC, about this game is gone. So what happens to all the stuff I just bought?
Yeah, and I would really like to see as an industry initiative the standardization of when of games having the ability to let fans continue them. Of okay, so for Marvel Heroes fans, what if they could run private dedicated servers? What with the shutdown? Okay, we're basically shutting down the game centrally, but we're going to let the people who enjoy it still operate it and have a way to do that. And because it's sad to see, it's sad to see things like that go. And
Mm-hmm.
when the makers of these games are unwilling or unable to provide that opportunity for archiving and just for the fans to say, we respect the time and money that you've put into this experience, and we don't want it to be lost.
Yeah. And to give you the reference point, the game was initially released in 2013. So that's 4 years worth of content, work, and of course microtransactions. Poof. We'll never
Yep.
see it again, basically.
All lost like tears in rain.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And if we start talking about game preservation, I mean that'll take us apart like 1 o'clock in the morning my time, because I have a whole lot to say about that. But yeah, it's definitely going to be very concerning, especially as I guess here's a very interesting point. Again, with your background with doing so much with mobile, Carter, like, are there any, like, I guess I'm not even sure this is the right term, but like legacy iOS games still being run? Those are 4 or 5 plus years old that are still being maintained, even if they are not like the most successful. They're not like a Candy Crush or a Clash Royale or so on.
Well, it's funny you mentioned like 5 years, and Clash of Clans has actually turned five this year, and that's obviously
Yeah.
still going. There are some games that are still maintained and updated. Really, a lot of especially with the 32-bit apocalypse, like there were a lot of indie developers that they had these games that hadn't made money in years, and they still continued to and they released the update because it's like, we don't want this to go away.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, we've seen cases and I think the big one is actually the BioShock port for iOS. If anyone who follows mobile game closely knows that this was a huge scandal among kind of that enthusiast community, of where 2K released a BioShock port for iOS, and it cost like $15. And then a later version of iOS had an issue with Unreal Engine 3, I believe, and it caused the game to not work. But 2K never got around to updating it, and eventually pulled it from the store. And this was the game lasted for like less than a year as a working product that you could use, and 2K was just like, okay, we're not going to update this anymore. It might have been because the team that made it was disbanded, or maybe they made a business decision. But that's the thing, is that there's a lot of games on the iOS era especially that are lost to history. And that's actually the nice thing about Android, is because for two reasons actually. One is that Android as an OS, it's a lot easier to distribute things like the APK files for games. So archiving can exist on that platform. Also, the fact that on Android you have a lot more access to the hardware, so you can run older software versions, and you can maintain older devices if you wanted to. Whereas with iOS, this, and I don't know if you know this as a guy who only bought an Android phone recently, but on iOS, Apple controls the software updates. You can't roll back to an earlier version of software on iOS. This happened around the days of iOS 4. There was a case of where people were rolling back to earlier versions of iOS to jailbreak their phones. And so what Apple did was they started having the iTunes servers sign the firmware updates, so people couldn't go back. And if you updated, then, well, there you go. But the problem is now there's a lot of apps, there's a lot of classic games that aren't playable anymore. Probably my favorite iOS game of all time is Super Quick Hook, and I can't play that on my iPhone anymore. Now the game got ported to Android about a year or two ago, so I can go play it over there, but I can't play that original experience on the original devices that it was intended for anymore.
And I think, just like with the console and PC side, I think it's only going to get worse before it gets better, until we actually, again, see some kind of level of standards being introduced, or a way of some kind of way to easily archive this stuff.
And that's the thing is that we're at this point right now of where there's so much to potentially archive that it's going to be that it's, even if you find a way to archive all this stuff, it's going to be difficult to keep track of it, and there's going to be games that are lost to history. But it's kind of sad, just because, like, there's a lot of games that are just, like I said, there's formative experiences, especially for mobile, and kind of the gold, kind of the gold rush that happened. And if you wanted to go back and relive these experiences, you can't, because of software compatibility, or because of some games that will be like let's say 20, 30 years down the line, let's say Clash of Clans stops running at some point. Well, Clash of Clans was a hugely influential game for the 2010s and in mobile gaming, but someone down the road won't be able to experience that in the same way that you can go back. You can play Pong, you can play Super Mario Brothers, you can play Zelda, you can play Sonic. You can experience the classic era of gaming, but for the mobile era and for this era of gaming, it's going to be so much harder to experience and study years down the road.
Yep, I mean, even with the console and PC side, it's still a very hard sell. We've talked about this before, but there's still a lot of people on the consumer side, I'm sure even on the mobile side as well, who they view older games like older pieces of software or hardware that once a new thing comes along, who cares about that? And for a lot of the major companies, they just don't see the money or the reason to do true backwards compatibility. I mean, Nintendo has kind of been like the last bastion of that for some time, but with the Switch, of course, I don't think it is backwards compatible, unless anyone wants to, if anyone can correct me if I'm wrong on that point.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that comes down to, like I said, a business decision of is it worth trying to make these things backwards compatible, and maybe it's the kind of thing of where,
and the hardware as well.
Yeah, for sure. Especially with, I know the Switch is probably a vastly different hardware architecture from the Wii U. I mean, the Switch is basically just an Android tablet.
Yeah. And I've been saying this for years now, but I'm still waiting my dream as far as to get kind of like the GOG equivalent for classic video games or classic console games. Have a third-party company deal with that, kind of like what GOG's doing with PC games. But of course, on the console side, it's a lot harder when you're not only dealing with the software provider, but also Nintendo or Sega or anything like that.
Oh yeah, for sure. And you look at something like what Nintendo will sell you. They'll sell you Super Mario Brothers on the Wii and the Wii U and the DS, and but they're these digital locked copies, and it's all about the business.
Oh yeah. And you would think that with all the big rush with the NES Classic and the SNES Classic, that we could actually see more push towards getting these games readily available. Because I am sure right now, if I were to go on Amazon, that I am not going to be buying a NES Classic Edition or a SNES Classic Edition. Let's see if I am correct on that front, or I'll buy for like $800. Oh, here it is
Yeah.
for $200 or $190. Yeah, so and that's always been that. Or that's a major point there. That there are a lot of people, I'm sure, who still want a SNES Classic, but is there enough of a demand that will convince Nintendo to print more of these up? Just like they didn't print more Amiibos up, or didn't print more NES Classic editions up.
I mean, my thought there has been it's got to be some kind of artificial scarcity of Nintendo making people
Okay.
want it, because it's not like making this hardware it's easy. I'm just gonna straight up call it. I don't want to say it's not hard to do. No, it's easy to do. You look at some, you can run emulators on a Raspberry Pi. 8-bit Do makes these clone controllers. This stuff can be made. We have the technology.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So at some point, though, I would just love to see, someone take that ball and run with it. But let me see. What is our time? It feels like we've just started talking. We are just over an hour now, so it feels like we just started too. That's always
Yeah.
great. But
Yeah, this has been flying.
I know. We should have you on again sometime, either for like a separate cast, or have you back on. Maybe we can get Josh on as well if he's still watching too.
Yeah, he's told me you've been trying to get him on at some point. We got. I'm calling you. I'm calling you out, Josh. You got to get on.
But I guess we can talk about some of the games I've been playing, and then we'll move on and talk a little bit more about mobile and some of like the popular games with mobile, and of course loot boxes as well. So honestly, as I said, this past week, of course, was Black Friday, Cyber Monday, or the day my wallet dies edition. So I came out of, I think, relatively unscathed. I think I spent just under $100. I think like $88, $89 for like 7, 8 games. So that's not too bad in the grand scheme of things. I did miss out on buying Prey, just because I wasn't sure my computer could handle it, and the game Shadow Tactics, which is kind of like uh, a stealth game. Have you ever heard of the Commando series?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's basically like that, but in Japan. So you're dealing with like ninjas and samurai, and you're trying to move them around. It's actually been out for a while now, and the game has not really gone down in price. Apparently, it was just a part of the November Humble Bundle, or their Humble Monthly, whatever the heck their subscription thing is, and I kind of missed it then. But I would love to get my hands on that. Let's see, games I actually did pick up. I picked up the SimCity 2014, the infamous horrible game from EA, because I'm going to do a Games of Ill Repute analysis that was from our Patreon last month. So I'm going to have to not only install that, but that also means installing Origin on my computer. So for all you folks watching, I hope you realize what you've done to me there. I did also pick up Plants vs. Zombies 2, the Garden Warfare, that kind of game, because it was also on sale. I figure, if I'm going to install Origin, I might as well see something that has gotten at least some positive buzz. And apparently I own Dead Space 3. I don't know when I bought it, I don't know where I bought it, but I own it on Origin, so maybe I can give that a look at some point.
I've had that happen twice to me this year of games. I was like, wait, when did I buy this?
I don't know when I buy these games anymore. I gotta go, wait, it says on Steam I bought this in 2014. What the hell was I doing in 2014 to own this? And I got plenty of games on there as well that I've just haven't had a chance to play either. Let's see, some other games I picked up. I picked up a River City Ransom Underground, the spiritual sequel, or maybe a direct sequel in some sense to the classic NES game. Oh yeah, that could be a ill repute analysis too. Exactly, Oscar. I've been playing Grim Dawn's expansion. It's a ARPG similar to Diablo, which I'm really enjoying. I've been playing the game from the developer's previous Titan Quest, and then I'm gonna move on to Grim Dawn after that. Oh, I picked up Horizon Zero Dawn, and if Josh is still watching, he promised me we're trading rants. He needs to rant about Gran Turismo Sport. I need to rant about Horizon Zero Dawn. So, Josh, where are you right now? I need you on here to talk about this. But Horizon Zero Dawn, I am very disappointed in that from what I've played so far. It just feels like it's hitting all the same open world trappings that I've seen, pick an open world game in the last 5 years, and it probably has copied that mechanic down. And I love the world, though. I mean, there's no denying that is a gorgeous looking game to play, but it's just not hooking me gameplay wise. I may just do some general streaming of it, but not just do a let's play and just see if people want to see it archived and all that. Let me see. Any other games I picked up? Oh, Oscar's been bothering me or making fun of me for months to try out Warframe, which I finally installed a few days ago. Have you ever heard of Warframe, Carter?
Yeah, I have. I have that installed on my PS4. I'm thinking I'm gonna try it out this weekend. I saw a coworker playing it one time. Like, oh, that looks interesting. I'll give that a shot.
Yeah. I'm still super duper early on into it, so I can't really give any detailed analysis, but it is very interesting to see, like, the production values of that game actually kind of surprised me going into it. Let's see. Yeah, the whole slow simmering away from the horizon. Yeah, I know. It's definitely hard to get into open world games. I mean, I was talking about this on Twitter yesterday, but I would love to be able to go back and play like. And this goes back to our game preservation talk. I would love to go back and play Spider-Man 2 or Hulk Ultimate Destruction, which I really loved. They were two of my favorite open world games back in the day, along with Just Cause 2. Let me see here. Actually, for you, Carter, and for anyone else watching, did you ever play the game Prototype or the Prototype series?
No, I think I missed out on that one. I am aware of that game though.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. It was done by the same team who did, looks like they did Scarface, and they of course did the original Hulk Ultimate Destruction, Radical Entertainment, and apparently they shut down in 2012. So now I get to feel extra sad about it during this podcast. But Prototype was kind of their way of doing Hulk Ultimate Destruction minus the whole Incredible Hulk IP kind of thing.
Mm.
But yeah, I would love to see more of those types of games, like go differently with the open world genre. Let me see. Any other games? Oh, I played this game. I don't. Something tells me you probably didn't hear of this one, Carl, because I didn't even know I owned it until yesterday. But this game called Pinstripe, which is kind of like a 2D action adventure game. It was, I think, Kickstarted a few years ago, and apparently I owned it. I think I must have got it from a Humble Bundle at some point, and I never got around to playing it until yesterday.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah. I did finally pick up Pyre. That was one of the games I got from the Black Friday sale. That's the game from Super Giant Games, who did Bastion and Transistor. Did you ever play Bastion or Transistor, Carter?
I played a lot of Bastion, a little bit of Transistor. Those actually came out on mobile.
Yeah. I love Bastion, but I didn't really like Transistor all that much. It just never really clicked for me. And Pyre is, I'm kind of like in between. I'm not loving it, but I'm not hating it either. But I will say it is a gorgeous looking game. I was talking about this on Twitter the other day, but this has really been a great year for video game art and aesthetics. I've seen some ridiculously beautiful games this past year.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things I kind of like about the rise of indie games and kind of as console and PC games are kind of starting to hit maybe not so much a wall, maybe kind of a plateau as far as okay, how much farther can we really go with graphics? Is there's a lot of room for innovation and in terms of different graphical styles and room for experimentation and I know one game that came out and I have it and I know the developers back when I lived in Chicago, and the artist for this game is incredibly talented. Battle Chef Brigade. That's one I've been meaning to play just because the art for that game is so gorgeous.
Oh yeah, I just played that last week right on Thanksgiving too. Yeah, all hand drawn style to that. It was also really good looking game.
It was fun. That studio actually started out making a couple of mobile games. One of their big ones was called Color Sheep, and one of my favorite anecdotes, kind of about how the influence for mobile games works, is that so Color Sheep got a write up in the New York Times talking about games, and apparently they got fewer like sales and downloads off of that than compared to like a YouTuber who mentioned the game and had a link for it in the description. that drove so much more attention and traffic to the game than the New York Times did.
Interesting. Yeah, it looks like you got a question in chat. Oscar asked you, have you played Reigns on mobile?
Yeah. I was a huge fan of Reigns. So when it came out last year, it was last year, I believe. I was a huge fan of that. I got a copy a couple days before release, and I played a ton of that before it. Yeah, before releasing, did a review. It was one of my favorite games of last year, and actually, outlet I used to write for, Touch Arcade, wrote a preview this week of the sequel that's coming out next week, Reigns Her Majesty, and apparently it might just be even better than the original. Of course, the question is, will now that the idea has been used, can the sequel that iterates on it feel like an improvement to it? I guess, but. It sounded really interesting, and Reigns is a really fascinating experience. So it does kind of require a guide if you want to get the best ending, because it's a little obscure to figure out.
And speaking about games getting a sequel, I'm sure you probably heard this, but do you know the game Idle Heroes, Carter?
Yes.
Did you hear the news about the sequel to it?
No, I haven't.
The sequel, because of all the talks about monetization and loot boxes and such, they had decided for Idle Heroes 2 is going to be a $30 retail game instead of free-to-play or any microtransactions.
Huh, that's gonna be an interesting one.
Yeah. I sent them an email. I would love to talk to them more about, but we'll see if they get back in touch with me.
Yeah, I'm gonna be fascinated to see how that that works out. Just because I think there is interest from the audience that pays for premium games for idle games. So I think the genre works, but I don't know. If you do like idle game, oh yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, to see like an idle game where that kind of design be put to a retail or somewhat big budget experience, that's gonna be very interesting.
Yeah. The only idle game I can think of that was actually premium was Space Plan. Did you play that earlier this year?
It sounds familiar. I played something space related. Let me see. It may be on Steam, actually.
Yes. Yeah, it was on mobile. It's on Steam, published by Devolver Digital.
I think I played the free version of this, like from the actual website, but I did not play the retail, the $2.99 one.
Yeah, I never played the original, but the $2.99 retail one is really interesting. I see Mike's got a couple of questions. I actually want to talk first about I paid for games, parentheses Gameloft, and they turned it free to play. That reminds me, I was at Game Developers Conference in San Francisco back in 2015, and Gameloft had released a first-person shooter on mobile called Modern Combat 5, and they released it as a $6.99 game. And I met up with them at GDC, and like, we're turning Modern Combat 5 free to play, and I was like, I know people are going to be mad about this. And it's like, I was just waiting for like weeks, like, when are they gonna do this? I want to see the salt that comes from this. But Mike's other question is, premium model sustainable on mobile? No, it has not been sustainable on mobile for a long time now. To get back to what Mobile Games Festival or Mobile Games Forum. Sorry, that's what it was called. Now it's just called Games Forum going forward. But there were two moments that were kind of like, okay, premium doesn't work. Was one, there was a developer asking at that, and the panelists were like, if you're willing to go with like a niche game and you don't really care too much about money, then sure. I mean, the problem with premium on mobile is that mobile was really hit by the race to the bottom. Yeah. Because, mobile games initially released as like $9.99, $4.99. Then people started seeing that 99 cents would work, and then eventually it's like, what if we did free sales? And then Apple turned on in-app purchases, and games started doing that, and then they turned on in-app purchases and free games, and we all see where it goes from there. Premium on mobile is pretty much a rounding error. You'll see the occasional premium game do well, but like, you look at like Minecraft is the #1 premium mobile game. It's $6.99. If you look at it on the grossing charts, it is far below anything free to play. I'd love for premium to be sustainable on mobile. I think that there are some games that for developers that find an audience, even things like Monument Valley have done well, but it's a risky move to make, and even in a case of like I see Oscar mentioning like Mario Run, like well, first off, I think Mario Run got a late transition from like actual free to play to that kind of freemium model, which doesn't work. Like, Fire Emblem Heroes has made a lot more money than Super Mario Run has. It's a hard business model to work with, but just kind of the idea of both of consumers are willing to play and pay for games that have unlimited monetization in them versus if you get to a point where I only want to charge you $3, or here's a one-time $10 purchase. The problem is if consumers might be willing to give you more, but if you're only willing to take so much, then that's how much money you're going to make.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and going back to what you were saying in terms of the risk involved, you also have the risk of competing with the free-to-play games as well. I mean, again, if someone sees two games on the iOS store, one that's $6.99, one that says free, which one are people going to look at first? And
Yep.
Oscar had a really good question as well. What about premium PC or console ports to mobile? How has that been doing?
Though, so those seem to do well in certain instances. I mean, I have heard of cases where they barely break even, and the support for later updates can be a challenge. But I think as a way for developers to kind of help out their long tail and make a little bit of extra money, it helps. But the problem the problem for the developer is that a game that's like $20 on PC, you can maybe that might wind up being $5 or $7 on mobile. The great thing for mobile gamers is, hey, here's this game that costs like $20 on PC. You can get it for a fraction of the price on mobile. It's a sweet deal if you play on mobile, if you're willing to wait a bit for the ports to come by.
Mm-hmm. And I've seen like similar such like on the PC side, like with a lot of games that were ported from mobile to PC, and they say, why should I spend $9.99 on your game when you're selling it for a free or $1 on the iOS store?
Yeah, and there's weird cases of games that will release on mobile and PC simultaneously. Like one of my favorite games from 2016 was Crashlands, and that was $15 on PC but $5 on mobile. And it's like, well, it's kind of funny because it's like just because of the market they had to sell the game for less, but it's the exact same game. You can literally connect to a cloud save account and play with your same save on the different devices. Literally the only thing that's different is, are you playing it on your computer or are you playing it on this?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. And I've talked to developers in the past as well who've had that trouble deciding, how do I take my PC game and bring it to mobile, or vice versa. Because it's not as simple as you just said, Clark. It's not as easy as just slapping a price tag and releasing a port. You have to adjust for the market. You have to adjust for, who is exactly playing this game.
Yeah, and I feel like the kind of the mobile stigma is a problem as well, that you have a lot of gamers that if they see a game that was on mobile first, it's like, mobile game, get away from me, versus
oh god, yes.
Versus if you get going the other way, mobile gamers, especially the ones that are enthusiasts that aren't as big fans of free to play, like, oh wow, I can get this awesome like PC real game experience. It's a fraction of the cost, and I can play it anywhere. They're very grateful for it. But the problem then is, well, how much money can you manage to make off of it?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. I guess here's a question for you, Car. Going back to what we were just saying with like idle games and the clicker genre, are there any games of that genre that you particularly like, whether it's on mobile or PC or anywhere?
Yeah, there's a couple that definitely come to mind. The one that really hooked me on the genre a few years ago was a game called Bitcoin Billionaire, which was published by a studio called Doodle Cake Games. That they started off as a developer and then they basically became a publisher. They still make their own games occasionally, and they published this game that's just is just ridiculous. It's the idea of your guy's like quacking at his computer, making billions in bitcoins, and you travel through time, and it's just this entirely ridiculous experience, and I had a lot of fun with it. I've played a few since then. One one that I gotta call out is Charming Keep, just because it has the cutest graphics ever. It is way too adorable of a game. And another one that I really liked is Crusade. I think it's Crusaders of the Lost Idol. I think is what it's called. But that is really fascinating because it's a clicker idle game, but it just has this incredible depth to it, and like all these characters and formations and missions you can go on, and I sunk sunk a bunch of hours into that one.
Is
The one earlier this year.
is that the same developer who's doing Idol Champions of the Forgotten Realms?
Yes.
I was playing. I got hooked on that for about a month. Just before, I think last month, I just finally managed to like tear myself away from it because I have that same pattern. Whenever I play idle games, I get hooked on them, and then I basically have to go through withdrawal and get myself locked up in like the sober tank, wherever they call it in the jail, to get off that game.
Yeah, yeah.
I actually did play both Adventure Capitalist and Fallout Shelter. What about you?
Yeah, oh yeah, I've played both of those.
The one I will say that came the closest to me to spend money on it was Realm Grinder, which I know was a PC. I think it was ported to the mobile side. It was just immensely. It was actually like a complicated idle game in terms of how to optimize and go about getting achievements and such.
Oh yeah, that one did come out on mobile. I think I messed around a little bit of that. It didn't seem to be very optimized for mobile screens. I think if I recall, it was very small on the even on the iPhone 6 Plus of the that I use. But I know Congregate makes a bunch of those idle games. Like they published the Adventure Capitalist and Adventure Communist and bunch of games like that.
Yeah. All right, I think with that, we can probably move on to talking more about mobile games. So we are almost at an hour and a half in. Before we do that, just a quick, I guess, wrap up of my list of games I've been playing. So we talked about Pyre, Horizon. Trying to think if there's anything like else notable. In terms of games that I'm actually excited about, I did hear for us console fans that the new Shin Megami Tensei game has been announced for Nintendo Switch, and Sega's doing another Valkyria Chronicles game. So I'm really happy about that. And hopefully it will be better than that Valkyria Revolution game that came out earlier this year. Oh, and I almost forgot. I almost picked up Wolfenstein and Yooka-Laylee because they were both on deep discount as well. And unfortunately, I just ran out of extra money at that point for those games. But I think with that, we better get to our final topic, or we'll be here to like sometime like around midnight or 1 o'clock my time, and we'll talk more about mobile and loot boxes and such. And it looks like you have 2 questions in chat, and then I'll ask you one myself, Carter.
All right. Mike is asking, do you think the loot box issue in the news reflects badly on IAP as a whole? Well, the thing is, like, the loot boxes are, like, as I kind of talked about with the Call of Duty similarity, that it's kind of the same issue. But the thing with loot boxes is that, especially in paid games, is that they're on top of this game that people have already paid for. And I think that's where some of the controversy comes from. And granted, a lot of people don't like IAP to begin with, but I think that it is very different of when you're talking about this game is free to play, but then you pay on top of it versus I paid $60 for this game and now they want more and more. And so I don't know if it reflects badly on IAP as a whole. I think that a lot of it comes from the same sort of I don't like paying on top of a thing, but then there's an aspect that's not there as far as IAP goes on mobile, of the fact that it's on top of a $60 game versus you pay nothing for this game, and if you don't like it, well, all you're out is a little bit of time if you don't like the way that it monetizes or something like that. A question from Oscar. Any thoughts on the build your town games like Simpsons Tapped Out, Futurama, Family Guy, and the monetization model? The thing I would say is that, and this is maybe the one criticism I have of mobile games in general, is that because they're so very much driven around monetization, that it can make a lot of those games like that seem similar. Like especially like the Simpsons Tapped Out, it was one of the big ones that also was like, we're gonna make fun of free to play games, and yet we are a shameless free-to-play game. And then Family Guy basically decided to just copy that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
here we go, town builder with sarcastic town builder, ironic town builder.
Oh yeah.
Uh, and yeah, I mean the thing is that those games are kind of built around the idea of people being able to come back to them, of like games that you could play for a few minutes at a time, and they find ways to tempt you to spend. But even the thing to realize about free to play games still is that 2%, 3% of people paying for a free to play game is kind of the average, or even like 3% is a really good number. So a lot of these players are playing for free, and they're finding ways in these games to either, if they hit a paywall, then they decide, oh, I'm going to go play something else because there's 100 other free to play games that released this week, or even if they really like this game, that they'll find ways to min max it, and they kind of see the system
Oh
as
yes.
the challenge of like, okay, how can I beat this? And it's an interesting kind of game within a game for for the player, I think. But
Yeah.
yeah, just kind of like, my fear from mobile gaming going forward is that I don't want games to just be like town builders. I mean, granted, I mean, not to say that they all are town builders. There's a lot of different experiences out there, and there's
Mm-hmm.
even little iterations between these games that make them different. Look at something like how Clash of Clans is essentially a town builder with combat versus how, like, you have more pure town builders, or games that try to have a town building aspect on top of some other game. And yeah, I would like to see more creativity when possible, but part of it is that these monetization systems are there because they're proven to work.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and going back to what you were just saying regarding people trying to min-max these games, I mean, right here, I'm raising my hand that I have done that many times in IO games to figure out the best and most optimized way to play. And I think what's very funny is what you were saying a few minutes ago regarding going to Call of Duty and seeing all these or mobile trappings in that. I felt the same way when I was trying to play those free-to-play city builders. I go, wait a minute, this one has premium currency too, and it's going to speed things up. Or it's the same exact store for each and every one of these games.
The thing that sucks about being someone that plays a lot of mobile games is that when you dive into a lot of these games, it's like the tutorial's like, oh, I know all this information already. I've played a dozen other games that are similar to it. Just show me what's fresh and new.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is that people need tutorials. They like tutorials, or it's just become the common thing. It's like, well, you got to do it.
Mm-hmm. So I guess with that, it is, I think, time for me to give you some questions. I'm going to have to put you on the stand here, Carl, because I got some mobile questions on myself, and we'll see how things go. In terms of, this is one of the challenges I have. I was talking to Josh about this, as well as folks on my private Discord channel, or the Discord channel for anyone who donates through our Patreon. But one of the things that I find being a traditional console and PC gamer is trying to find that mobile game that strikes that balance between, yes, I understand there's microtransaction that I need to make money, but there's still enough game here that I can enjoy without, being completely assaulted by IAPs and, just overwhelming that, as you said, the paywall has been a big point. Like, I'll give you an example. I played the game Clicker Heroes for a few weeks, and I just got to that point where I hit that paywall, and I'm like, no, I don't see enough, or I haven't played enough here to make it worth it for me to think about giving them money, so I stopped playing it. So, I guess for you, Carter, I know we were talking about this before our massive podcast so far, but what are some really good mobile games that you've played that have managed to strike that balance?
So what I've actually been playing kind of recently, or over the last few months, is Brawl Stars, and that's a Supercell game, and that's going to be making money at some point. But here's what's interesting is, like, because it's in Canada, I can't actually pay for it, so I have to experience that as a free game where I can't play, and you find ways to find the fun in it, and find ways to find the engaging core game. And to be fair, like, the way that I approach mobile games, especially a lot of the free-to-play games, is that if it gets to a point where I get bored, or I feel like, okay, I've hit the wall of interest, I've hit the wall of paying, I'll move on to something else. In part because they are free to play, and that's just the thing, is like you have to kind of maybe get to the idea of looking at mobile games as being willing to experience a lot of different things. Either you're going to find yourself attached to one or two experiences, or just moving on. That's kind of how I approach. That's how I approach things, and like I've played games like I actually got sucked into like Power Rangers Legacy Wars, which was part of the Amazon Mobile Masters Las Vegas, and I played it to study it, and I started to get suckered into it. And one of the things that was fascinating about it was that it was this fighting game that looked a lot like other games, but when you play it, it's like, oh, there's actually a lot of things that are different here. Like it has real-time multiplayer as opposed to the asynchronous kind that like Injustice has. And I was willing to spend like $10 on it, but when I kind of got tired of constantly going with the game, was like, okay, I'm done playing this. So that's maybe like a non-answer to your question, but that's kind of how I approach it, is that if I feel like a game is becoming too much of a time sink, or if I get bored with it, or if I worry that I'm hitting a paywall, like I'm willing to move on. Now, part of that might just be because of the fact that I am a game journalist who has been in the mobile space and have to constantly cover a lot of games and like jump from game to game. So that's kind of how I approach it, as opposed to if you're diving into it from more of a gamer perspective versus someone that also has to kind of take a larger global scale of the market, I guess. If that even answers your question at all.
Oh, but I guess again, I've been trying to find more games to play. I'll give you a quick snippet of some of the games I've played. I already mentioned Clicker Heroes. I tried out this game, Post Night. I think that's what it was called.
Oh yeah.
That one I have that still installed, so I'm still liking that one. I tried the South Park Phone Destroyer game, and I kind of ripped it apart on my website after hitting that wall very quickly. Let me see, what else? I tried this idle mining game. I forget the name of it. There's actually a few idle mining games. Who am I kidding?
Yeah, I'm thinking like, wait, which one is he talking about? I'm thinking of a couple here.
This reminds me when I was talking to Josh the other night on the. I talked to him last week. He's like, yeah, I played this indie game with pixel graphics. You know which one I'm talking about? I'm like, you just described like 10 million games there, Josh. And I think that is about it. I guess what I play at least recently on the mobile side. So I guess, are there any other really good like mobile games that you've played that? I guess another, maybe to better rephrase the question, mobile games that really show off, I guess, the positives of the market or the genre.
Oh, I mean, there's so many that I would even struggle to start. I made a list of like some games from like recent memory. They hold up. Cat Quest is great. That's actually a multi-platform game, but that kind of started off as a mobile game from a mobile developer. The Stranger Things game, that it's a tie-in, and it's like a Zelda-inspired game, but it's really great and really adapted for touchscreens. I mentioned this game developer earlier, Rocket Cat Games. Well, they made Super Quick Hook, but anything they make is gold. Super Quick Hook, Wayward Souls, Mage Gauntlet. They're definitely worth checking out. Card Thief, Card Crawl, and Miracle Merchant are all great like solitaire card games, and they're free on Android, but only as like a premium unlock because to avoid piracy. Otherwise, they're paid games on iOS. Catbird is a great, charming indie pixel platformer. Causality was a great puzzle game I played earlier this year. That has like a whole time warping aspect. I think that might have come out on PC first. Imbroglio by, I think his name's Michael Bro. I think Brough. Anything by him is really fascinating, and that's one that I come back to from time to time. Even I think another one of his games that's really popular is 868 Hack, which is a really interesting roguelike with kind of glitch art. The Motorsport Manager games, Motorsport Manager 2 came out earlier this year. Those are interesting like racing simulation games. Not like racing simulator, but like kind of manage a racing team. The Witness and Talos principal ports for mobile are pretty good. They're definitely feel downscaled from their PC versions, but that experience on mobile. Slayway Camp was a puzzler that came out, I believe, on PC first, but I played on mobile and it's perfect. And I could go through like just so many games as far as like
maybe you should just like send them to me on email or something. That may be the easiest way here.
Yeah. Oh! I almost forgot about this game. What? It's a solitaire game. I'm trying to remember the name. I'm actually Flip Flop Solitaire. Zach Gage. Anything he makes, download it. He's an incredibly talented game developer, and that's the thing I would really recommend for you or anyone like diving into mobile as a whole is try to go past the popular games. Try to go past the free-to-play games. There are great paid games out there. There are great free games that are just ad-supported. Like the developer Nitromi makes these games that are all ad-supported, but you can just pay $3.99 to basically unlock them as a premium game. And that's the thing. There are so many great mobile games out there, and there's so many games you can just dive into, and it's hard to keep track of and to evangelize the platforms. Like, I can't remember all these games I've played over the years, all these enjoyable experiences, and you kind of have to dig. And part of the problem is that when it comes to like on the journalism side of covering mobile games, is that there's so much constantly happening that it can be tough to dive into, and it can be tough for outlets to track, and it'd be tough even for people in the mobile journalism space, anyone trying to cover mobile beyond I just want to cover like the Clash of Clans games, the Supercell games to keep track of it. And I don't envy anyone, even someone like you, trying to dive in, because you can get such a small picture of what mobile gaming really is, and there's just so many experiences out there that you have to be willing to dig. It can be hard to find, but if you kind of put your ear to the ground a bit, search the store, take a few risks on some games that look interesting. There's still indie developers out there that that their number one concern is the art, and they think that they have a game that works great on mobile, and you just gotta give it a shot. And that's really the thing that I recommend to anyone that wants to see mobile gaming great. Is just keep digging. There's so many great games out there. There's more than just the top grossing games. There's more than just the free to play games that monetize. There's so many games out there, and that's how you have to see mobile. It's just there's a ton of games. I could keep digging and finding you great games that I've enjoyed over the past few years, but it would take up so much time.
Yeah. And I see that talking about again the challenge of covering all these games. I feel the same way about the indie and console side. I mean, geez, between all the games I've bought and even the games I get as press keys from developers, I am just like, there's just too many games to look at. I mean, I just had to uninstall XCOM 2 just because I don't have the time to play that game anymore, and it is just crazy. And I guess one point I'm sure that you are well aware of, Carter, is the discoverability issues on the iOS store and Play Store, the same thing that we're seeing indie developers face on Steam, with so many games being released on a day-to-day basis. I guess here's as a quick tangent to that, Carter. Like in terms of mobile games being released, is it still happening daily? Like new games are being released, or has things slowed? Okay, I'm gonna say yes.
Yes. There is you have your slow weeks and you have your busy weeks, but yeah, I mean I could easily compile lists of like multiple games in any given week that look interesting, or have something interesting about them worth checking out, something notable about them. No, the onslaught of releases just never really stops, and that's the problem with trying to cover mobile and trying to dive into it. And some of my old editors will tell you about this, that mobile's so tough to cover on a regular basis because it rarely ever stops. The only time it ever really stops is when the iTunes store freezes for over Christmas. That's pretty much it. Like, it's kind of funny just because like I feel like a lot of the big AAA games have come out for consoles already, but this month is going to be there's going to be a bunch of big mobile games because developers and publishers want to get on the store like right before that Christmas rush, before people are getting their new iPhone 10s, their new Android phones. They want they want to be there. They want to, they want to have it out there, and it's going to be just bonkers. Even just that last like Thursday before Christmas is always just so many games that pop up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the same thing goes for the independent market over here on the PC side. I mean, we're seeing daily games release over here. I'm kind of I may be entering this point myself at this rate, but it's good. I do feel a little sorry for people who have to cover both indie and mobile games at the same time. I mean, there's just not enough hours in the day to look at it all.
No, no, there isn't. I at PvP Live now, I don't necessarily cover the same things I was covering necessarily back at Touch Arcade, but that was the problem at Touch Arcade in particular was when you cover the mobile space and trying to dig up the great indie games. It's like it's impossible.
Yeah.
It is an impossible task to keep up with.
Yeah. Now, here's a question for you, Carter. You just mentioned that there's a lot of mobile games trying to get out before, Christmas and the holiday season. Does the mobile side, I'm not sure if you've tracked this, but do mobile games like operate like on a similar schedule as like the console and PC side? As in, we see like big pushes for like September to October. Then there's of course, December for the holiday season. We of course have our slow period in winter and like the start of summer. Like, does that similarly happen on the mobile side?
Um, it can be kind of random just because the market is constantly shifting. Comparing like what one year is to another can be tough. But yeah, but really I mean, like the big time, the big times are around Christmas. When the new iPhone releases, that's another huge time because like I said, you got the new. The hot new device, or the new iOS 11. You had a bunch of games come out then. WWDC in the summer was big. I know that's actually when Monument Valley 2 released, I believe. And then I mean, you see a lot of games that pop up in the spring. But really, like the thing about mobile is that because there's not that same kind of like hype cycle that console and PC games get, you can get games that just pop up out of nowhere. I'm actually thinking of the last two Supercell games. Like Clash Royale, it was first revealed like the first Monday of January. I woke up that morning and it's like, oh wait, Supercell just announced a brand new game. And you can go download like the beta of it now. Like there's not necessarily that kind of equivalent, I think, on the console or PC space, or what was it? And even this is actually a good example of just how chaotic the mobile space is. I believe this was Wednesday morning of like E3 in like mid-June, and this was actually like a couple days before I started at PvP.Live. Supercell out of nowhere decides to announce, "Hey, we're announcing a new game this morning." And it's like, again, out of nowhere, and during E3. Like the idea of like announce like console PC, like, okay, we're announcing a new game. It's not going to be at E3, but we're going to announce it during E3 would be, what are you doing? But on the mobile side of things, it's so much of a different world that companies can do that. But even for like a lot of the big games that are out there, what happens is a lot of these games wind up soft launched in other countries. So you kind of can get this idea of what the game's like ahead of time, and soft launches are really about tuning the game, monetization tuning, seeing what works, how hard can they tighten the screws on players without pissing them off. But you can kind of get like a preview of games before they come out because it's easy to download the games from the other countries. Like that South Park game that just released back in November, that soft launched back in June. So there have been people playing that game for months now in a quasi-public release.
Now, speaking about those games being soft launch, one thing that I've been noticing on the Android or the Play Store, I've been seeing a lot of mobile games being released in early access versions. And I'm just wondering, Carter, like from your point of view, like how has that been treated in terms of the market? Because for the PC side, I know there are people who have sworn off anything early access, and there's still that debate as to whether or not, from a development standpoint, to use early access to help your game, or to just wait till the end and then release it normally.
So the thing about early access on mobile is that early access, as like specifically early access, is a thing exclusive to Android, because iOS and Apple, the way they control the App
Hmm.
Store, they don't let developers release games that are in intentionally unfinished formats. So what's happened is that soft launches become the way of doing a kind of beta release, in that the games that are theoretically ready for public consumption, but they will only release them to a limited audience. Like they'll release them in Canada or Australia or Singapore, or countries like that. And even it's kind of become like an open secret of like the Brawl Stars Reddit openly talks about the game, and they talk, and Supercell Auction was like, the reason we haven't released on Android even in soft launch form is we know you people are going to go download it and overwhelm our soft launch servers if we do this, so y'all gotta wait.
Nice.
Yeah. So yeah, early access as it exists on mobile is just a completely different thing, and kind of as a tangent but related, the thing that's really interesting about the mobile games market is because Apple is such an influential company, because granted there's a lot more Android devices out there, but Apple users are more likely to spend money.
Hmm.
So that platform remains very important, and if Apple doesn't necessarily allow for a particular thing, it's tough, because then it doesn't necessarily become normalized. And also, it's like, well, why are we doing this thing if we can only do it on Android, and we're limiting a huge part of the market?
Hmm. Yeah, and that's very interesting about how much Apple or iOS and by virtue Apple have control over what kind of games are being released or what kind of states they're being released at, because we've been discussing this for a while now regarding Steam's policy and pretty much being, carte blanche when it comes to what games they allow on the Steam marketplace, and how that has in effect hurt discoverability and even hurt the standard of the store with so many lesser quality games being released on there.
And it's just so funny to see this, because like this is, I feel like I've been living 5 years in the future with how things are going. Like I remember hearing a story about how like games on the Switch that are cheaper than other titles on the eShop are doing better. I'm like, I've seen this story before.
Nice. Let me see. I know. Wow, we are almost at 2 hours into this
Oh,
cast, so
oh my.
we are going to probably have to wrap things up in the next few minutes. I do have one big question for you, Carter. And for those of you watching this live right now, I guess this will be our last call for questions. But again, if you're free in the future, I would love to have you back on. And again, maybe we can rope Josh in at some point as well.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so here's my big question. I'm sure as someone who's been covering mobile, you've probably have heard this one several times in the past, and that is discussion over the mobile market. I've spoken to people about whether the mobile side of things is really sustainable in the long term. And of course, we spoke earlier about how there's still not that case for preservation or preserving these games, if the developer can no longer support it, or Josh is back on there, or if, the game just doesn't do well. So my question is, do you think the mobile market as it is now is still sustainable for development, or do you think that things will have to change in order to keep things going in the future?
I think it's sustainable, because right now the way that companies are making money is very formulaic. Formulaic doesn't sound like the right word, but mobile is so much more the way that companies have found ways to make success and make money has been so much more distilled down to raw business, raw capitalism,
Mm-hmm.
to the to where they found ways to make money most efficiently, in part because mobile didn't have the rules or the standards that console gaming has. You can get away with things on mobile that you can't do on console. Like I said, we see about the controversy with loot boxes, and
Mm-hmm.
this is a 5 6 year old controversy
Yeah.
on mobile. And you talk about, oh, there's too many games being released. They talk about discoverability, and mobile's had that issue for 7, 8 years now. Now, so I absolutely think mobile is sustainable, and I think that really it's going to be a case of where other gaming markets are going to look at are going to look a lot more like mobile in the future.
Mm.
And and like I said, I just see the future of gaming, like I said, looking a lot more like mobile unless something big happens with with regulation of gacha systems, of loot boxes, of random elements, something like that. That's the only thing that I could think of. But if business continues as usual, I think mobile's going to be the way that things look.
Mm. All right. I know. I would love. I got mentioned or a message on Twitter that I would love to have like Ramin on because we had this whole discussion about loot boxes and the state of the mobile market last week, and his opinion is definitely a lot different than yours regarding sustainability. But yet, it is a fascinating thing to look at because I mean, as a PC gamer, I remember hearing in the early thousands that PC gaming was going to die. The market's not sustainable. And then, of course, Steam hit, and all those discussions just, washed away in a matter of minutes. And Josh has a really good question, and I have a follow-up question for myself, but I'll give you Josh's question first. Because you've seen this evolution of mobile gaming economies, what lessons or advice can you give to console or AAA gamers as that transition is happening over here?
I would say that change is going to happen. That the video game business as it is right now is very much it's very much business driven. Games, as you know, the big major AAA games are going to follow the best business model. And the thing I would recommend is two things. One is vote with your wallet. Vote with your wallet. Vote, spend money on the experiences that you prefer because that's the best way that you have. The other thing is that we do live in a time right now of where there is a lot of media out there. There is a lot of it there. If you haven't dove into the indie space, do so. Find the experiences that are less trodden. Because if you like games, if you like games that are only pay once and that's it, they still exist out there. Like, we live in a time right now of where there are thousands of games happening at once, and many of them by developers that don't necessarily have the same business goals as someone else. That's just the thing I'd say is that with the way media is right now, with digital distribution having democratized so much, be willing to go out and explore other games that you might not have done before from names you might not have heard before because you might not like the way that AAA gaming is going to go because it's so very much driven by what makes money. And there are a lot of people out there. There's a lot of monetization experts out there who are laser focused on how do we make money off of these games. And you can see it right now with loot boxes. You go look in the mobile space and see how money is being made there. That is your future. It's going to get worse before it gets better if you don't like monetization. That's the thing. So, like I said, just you're gonna have to roll with the punches and find all these other great experiences out there and start to explore them, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think those are some really great words to end on, but I do have one more question for you. And going back, as you just said, with the idea of loot boxes and monetization, because as I'm aware of, I'm sure as my regulars are aware of, for us console and PC gamers, the use of gacha and loot boxes is almost like a cardinal sin for us when we're trying to play our games. So my question for you, Carter, as someone who has spent so much time playing mobile games, where do you feel is that line of it being acceptable? Like, when do you see like loot boxes and that gacha design working, and when do you see that it goes too far and that it just becomes intrusive to the player's experience?
Well, I think that if the system remains something that's cosmetic, then that's fine. that's fine by me. But in particular, if you're talking about something in the sense of starting to affect, when it starts to really affect gameplay design, especially in, like I said, in kind of the $60 console space right now, you kind of see things like I said we saw with the initial release of Star Wars Battlefront 2, and I think Shadow of War
Oh yes.
had the loot boxes kind of affect the game, and it's in a paid game. That's problematic to me. I think that if you are paying for the experience, then the additional monetization should be limited to cosmetics, or if they're selling you additional content on top of that. When you're talking about cheaper games, when you're talking about free to play, I think that the thing is that monetization is going to affect gameplay because that's the most effective way that it works, because that's what experts with the numbers and with all these practices have figured out. Is like there is a balance of giving the player just enough, and then offering the finding the right balance between the stick and the carrot.
Yeah.
But the thing also with free to play and monetization is, look, there's other games out there, and if you get to a point where you feel like you hit that paywall, if you hit that point, either you have to decide, hey, I'm willing to pay more to continue this experience, or move on to something else. But then again, there's also the kind of the complicated aspect of how a lot of games try to tie in social aspects, and keeping players there because they don't want to leave the community. Like, that's a big thing with the Machine Zone games like Game of War or Mobile Strike and the Final Fantasy 15, is that they really try to get people to stay in because they have their guilds, and they don't want to let their guild mates down, that sort of thing. And I've talked before to players of those games who were like, I hate this game, but I have these relationships here, and I don't want to let go of that.
Oh yeah, and the same can certainly be said of the MMO space, with all the social aspects of those games. Even during like their heydays in the early thousands, I've heard the stories from World of Warcraft, EverQuest, and the like, that it's not just about playing the game anymore. It's about hanging out with these people that they can become like your best friends. In some cases, you may never meet them in person. Other times, they may become friends for life.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, and as Mike's saying, yeah, the data mining when it comes to the microtransactions and the loot box, that's certainly something that a lot of people aren't happy to hear, especially when Activision had that whole announcement last month about getting the
yeah
what was it, the patent, there we go, for different like multiplayer or monetization tactics. And yeah, that's always been that tricky part. And I think this could probably be a good point to wrap up the cast on, is that like for someone like me, I mean, like you, and I'm sure like a lot like Josh and as well as some other people, I've played a lot of video games. That's certainly true. And because of that, I've seen a lot of how the sausage has been made. I see how the mechanics work to get these experiences. So when I play a mobile game or a free-to-play game, it's very easy for me to see those hooks. As you said when you went to Call of Duty, as I said when I came to play those clicker or the city building games on the mobile, that I can see almost immediately what steps are being done to, again, try to wrestle my money from me. And when that happens, it is such a complete turnoff for me. Because again, I come from the era of, I give you $10, $20, this game is mine until the end of time. And it's going to be, I think, very interesting to see how these two attitudes are going to go forward into the rest of this decade. Because as we've seen, and I was talking to Josh about this last week, we have, and as you were just saying earlier, Carter, that the whole mobile microtransaction, that kind of monetization, is being pushed more into traditional AAA gaming, into that retail experience. And how these two are going to coalesce, or if they can coalesce, I think it's going to be one of the bigger points for the last 3 years until we hit 2020.
Yeah, and like I said, I keep thinking about this idea that we're gonna see free to play hit consoles at some point,
Yeah.
because I think it's going to get to a point of where these companies are figuring out, hey, these console gamers are willing to
Hmm. Oh
spend money in
yes.
this way, and even you look at some of the big sales that happened like this year, like it's kind of crazy that like a game like Wolfenstein
Oh yeah.
2 was like $25 only like weeks after release, and like that
It's
doesn't seem like
oh
a
yeah.
good sign.
Yeah, like I was just talking to, I think Bill Gardner, or I think that's his name on Twitter. Like Horizon Zero Dawn came out in February, I think, of this year. It was one of the most celebrated games at its launch, and before the year's up, it's down to $20. I mean, Doom 2016 last year, that one shocked me. That after all the praise it got, I think I named it one of my top 10 games of 2016. That it was down to $30, and it was only 6 months old. So something about that is not adding up.
Yeah, and you know, you look at something like Fortnite Battle Royale launching as a free to play game
Hmm.
on consoles, and you know, and the fact that there's that digital store there, and that's kind of the tricky thing, is that as you get away from physical product,
Hmm.
that suddenly on on a digital storefront, everything, it's the great equalizer, and it's like, well, why should I pay for the $60 game when there's this free game I can try right here on the, you know,
Hmm.
sitting right next to it. And
Oh
I've
yeah.
seen how this go. I've, like I said, I feel like I feel like an oracle. I feel like I have seen your future, console gamers.
Uh, oh, that actually takes me again. There's just so many questions we could talk about here,
Oh yeah.
but let me check our time. Yeah, we're over 2 hours. Okay, this is the last one, I swear, and then we need to cut this off before everyone falls asleep. Again, with your experience with mobile games, are there any monetization or microtransaction based systems that you have sworn off of? Like, are there any that cross that line that if a game has them, you just won't play it, or you'll just move on to something else very quickly?
No, actually, I don't know. I have a bit of an open mind
Hmm.
towards monetization. I mean, I played like gotcha games. I've played games with, you know, like premium currencies. I played town builders. I spent money on
Hmm.
Clash of Clans and Clash Royale. You know, you start to understand how these systems work.
Yeah.
But you know, if I'm having fun with a game, you know, I'm willing to spend on it no matter what the system is. But I also feel like I like games that give me like that introductory way to spend money. Like I'm not just going to drop 9.99
Hmm.
on a game. I maybe drop 4.99 here, or you know, $1.99 there, just to kind of get started. But even then, like I've played a lot of games, but I've never really been a whale
Hmm.
in any of them. But yeah, like I mean, there's not, I won't necessarily get away from a game just because of the monetization. Like I'm gonna say that, you know, it, like there's a lot of free to play games out there that when you kind of see like, oh, I see how the system works, and it's like, well, you know, I'd like to see a little more variety, and it's a little disappointing to see the you know, to see behind the curtain and, you know how it works. But if a game, if I enjoy the core loop of a game, and if I, you know, enjoy the progression system to it, you know, I will dive in regardless of how it makes money.
Mm. And Mike just mentioned a really good point. The mobile games that require like bookmarks, contact lists. I will say one thing that will drive, that has driven me crazy, that has kind of become a good like no to games, is if they basically take over my alarm system. Like I downloaded, I think one of the games, I think it was Battle Jack from Supercell. I think that's who was making, or someone else. And
Yeah, not Supercell, but yeah, like Nexon published it, I
yeah,
believe.
Nexon, and it buzzed my phone at 3 o'clock in the morning, then again at 3:30 in the morning to let me know that loot boxes were ready to be open. I'm like, no, I'm not. No, this game is done after all that. Like, I'm not having this on my phone anymore.
Man, not man, the actual in game, the actual like things already in your game notifications, and not necessarily the
Hmm.
the oh, this. just come do this thing in the game notification. That's not what threw you off.
No, all of a sudden my phone just starts beeping. Like, says, "Oh, you gotta open up a loot box," and I'm like, "It's 3 o'clock in the morning. No, we're not doing this right now." All right, but again, there's a lot we can certainly segue into, and oh my goodness, it feels like we just started talking, and it's already been like about 2 hours in. But like I said, if you're free for the future, Carter, we can certainly have you back on, either again as our own cast, or have you back with either Rob or Josh at some point.
Yeah, no, this has been great. I absolutely love talking about the game industry and talking about mobile games, and yeah, I definitely would love to do this again. This has been fun.
Awesome. But it is time to say goodnight. Our Game Wisdom live show turned its own little podcast this week, but it's always great. Again, Carter, thank you so much for coming on. And like I said, I hope to hear from you real soon. If you wouldn't mind just staying on Skype for like one more minute when we hang up from the podcast here, and we'll be good to go. But
All right, we'll do.
awesome. Are there any places like if people want to follow you, like on Twitter or Facebook? Do you want to mention anything right now?
Yeah. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm Wondrous Hippo, WONDROUSHIPPO. I've got a link to my Twitch channel, which I haven't used a lot lately. I kind of fell out of that with my work schedule. But yeah, I want to get back into that. I've mostly done mobile games. I think now that I have my PS4, I might stream some of those games from time to time. But yeah, I like to stream mobile games on that channel. And yeah, Twitter's the main place to follow me. And yeah, obviously check me out. Check out my work at PVP.Live.com, of course.
Awesome. I just put your Twitter on the chat as well for people watching to follow you. And yeah, so if I remember, I'll also include in the description for this when it gets uploaded later. But I think with that, we will wrap things up for this week. So once again, for those of you who tuned in late or missed the announcements, this will be the last Thursday night for Game Wisdom Live. Starting next week, that is Sunday the 10th of December, we will be switching to Sundays for Game Wisdom Live going forward. The next show will probably be around either 2:33 EST in the afternoon. I'll make another announcement about it the Thursday the 7th so people know. But be sure to tune in for that and let me know what you think about that time for it. But other than that, thank you so much for watching this week. Again, Carter, thank you for coming on. And if we can get Josh and Rob on, I'm sure we'll be here till, I don't know, sometime maybe in a week. We'll just sit here and just keep talking. But for those of you watching this live, I will be doing a game stream in a little bit. I'm not sure if I'll do some Horizon Zero Dawn or Titan Quest. We'll see what happens. What was I about to say? Oh yeah, Saturday night will be the grab bag stream, of course. So we'll have 3 games voted on by the fans to play. And if you like to support Game Wisdom, be sure to check out our Patreon. Patreon.com/GWBicer for ways to support, get access to our private Discord channel, and more. As I said at the start, I'll be updating the goals, the goals and the rewards for December in a few days. And other than that, I am about out of voice for now. I'll have to regain it in 20-30 minutes for the stream. So let's end things here. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great rest of the week. And I will be seeing you, of course, daily on the Game Wisdom YouTube channel. And we'll be back live next Sunday. Oh, I used the voting for last week when we did the whole Thanksgiving shenanigans put everyone to holiday mode. I just used that voting for this week. So there are still plenty of games for people to vote on, thankfully. But let's end things here. So thanks again for tuning in. I'll catch you all real soon. And Carter, hopefully we can talk again on the cast in the future.
Yeah, well, absolutely love to.
Awesome. So I'll see you guys later tonight. And of course, I hope you enjoy this recorded on the channel. But otherwise, have a good night and see you all next time. Take care.